Welcome back, everybody. I'm so excited tonight. We actually have our guest here in the house, who is here by popular demand. All of my previous guests said this is a must show. So, since the late 1970s, our guest has been a popular guitarist and songwriter in the New England circuit. And so, welcome everybody, Tom Guerra.
Welcome. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Michelle.
Very excited. So let's get right down to the questions here. At what age did all of this start for you, and how? How did you get going?
It all started when I was a kid. I was very fortunate to have musical parents. They still, both of them, love music to this day, and some of my earliest memories were listening to the Beatles with my dad and listening to some blues and some jazz with my mom. So I always loved music. And then when I was in my teenage years, early teens, I was always into art. And one year I kind of got away from art and I started getting really into music, and I picked up a guitar that my brother had. He initially had bought the guitar, but then he discovered girls and left that behind. So I later discovered girls, but I started teaching myself how to play. And I was about 15 when I had my first gig, and we would do all of the community centers in the area: Newington, Wethersfield, Rocky Hill. And as a matter of fact, played in this building about 30-something years ago when it was the Greenfield Rec. Big dance there. So that's kind of how I started. And from there, it just kind of evolved. Initially played cover music for about the first 4 or 5 years. And then when I went away to school, I formed an original music band in the early 80s. And we played pretty much all over New England on the college circuit, and played a lot of original music. That was, one reporter said it was grime and gristle rock and roll. And this was during the whole MTV era, so we were kind of swimming upstream, swimming against the tide, playing this real heavy rock and roll stuff. So, and it just continued onward through the time I spent with the Mambo Sons, 15 years with them, and now onto my solo project.
Awesome. So when you talk about your parents and being supportive, that's actually one of the questions I like to ask our guests. Like, I know when I was younger, I wanted to play the drums, and it was like, yeah, girls don't play drums. But so were your parents supportive when you picked up the guitar? Were you cranking up your amp? Or they still supportive at that point? Like, how did that all go when you were young?
They became very supportive after a couple years when they realized it wasn't just something that was going to, irritate the neighbors. Unfortunately, in those days, the amps were huge. So my first amp was like a 100-watt amp, and practicing that in the basement, it would shake the whole house, shake the whole neighborhood. One time I took it out in my garage, and I called a friend across town, and I said, "Hey, listen out your window." And I was playing something. He goes, "That's the Kinks. You were playing the Kinks." So he could hear it across town. So it was ridiculously loud. But they were, after a few years, like when I went away to college and was making some money in the band, and that was sort of helping to pay my way. They were getting reports, or I'd send them like a clip of a newspaper clipping or something, and they became very happy for me, and very, very supportive ever since then, and they realized, I think initially they were afraid, oh God, he's going to go down that rock and roll path. But I think the people who get into it for the right reasons stay in it for a long time.
That's awesome. Now, have they attended shows? Like, if you played in the area?
All the time. Yeah, they will come, and they're there, and they know the music. They know all of the original songs, and my mom is really, to this day, very much into the lyrics. She'll call me about, what did you mean by this lyric or whatever. And my dad, he likes the whole thing, but he's more of a music listener. My mom is more of a, she was an English teacher, high school English teacher for years, so she's always into the literary aspect of it, I think. So.
Well, that's good. That's awesome. So now, when you were young and you said around 15, and you were first picking up the instruments, what inspired you? Who inspired you?
In terms of guitar playing, I think I loved the Beatles and the Stones guitar players, and then when I got really into Led Zeppelin, I loved what Jimmy Page did. I just thought that the sounds he got, they were as appealing to me as the technical stuff he was doing. So I had a little guitar, and before I got my big amp, I would play through a stereo we used to have, and I remember one winter school break, I sort of learned that entire Led Zeppelin 2 album and got all those funky sounds that he was getting and came pretty close to it. And I've always been interested in different guitar sounds. I mean, some guitars sound heavy, and I think as I went into the studio, I was always conscious of that and tried to make my recordings interesting sounding with different sonics, different guitars, different arrangements, and that type of thing. So I'm still big into the guitar as an instrument, and I would say the first player that really got me excited was a guy by the name of Rory Gallagher, who was an Irish guitar player, played a lot of blues. I loved him because buying his Photo Finish album changed my life. I think that was the late 70s. Because and this is what I loved about him, and what I love about most of the guitar players that I follow, he had a style that was unique, but he had elements of rock and roll. He had, his own thing going on. He had some Celtic influences. He had blues influences, and he kind of put them all together and made them his own. And I just, to this day, I love listening to him. And he's, never really made it huge in the U.S., was huge in Europe.
Still the sound there, I'm sure.
The sound was great, and that's why I fell in love with the Stratocaster as a guitar, which is, for the past 30-something years been my main guitar because of Rory Gallagher. And then other folks, I got really into the blues guys and got to play with some of them and over the years, and loved having Rick Derringer on our first album, and through Rick I met Johnny Winter and befriended Johnny. So all of those sort of bluesy and blues rock guys, I love them all,
Well, we're going to get there, but the next question I have for you is, we're calling our show here Homegrown Talent Exposed, and so we were chatting a little earlier about the fact that you grew up in the area.
Yeah.
Big part of Wethersfield because you worked for the town of Wethersfield.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And but mostly you grew up in Hartford, went to South Catholic. Mm-hmm. Actually had some friends stop by tonight to make sure they said hello. And so talking about educational background, South Catholic was a pretty prominent school back then, but what other types of education do you have, not just books-wise, but also musical?
Sure.
What did you do?
After I went to high school, I went to, through the Connecticut State College system, went to Eastern and Willimantic, and that was a huge education for two reasons. I studied business, music, and communications there, and some economics. And I also immediately hooked up with some folks that ran the Shaboo, which was, I think, one of the greatest clubs there, and some real hardcore musicians that sort of took me under their wing. So from a musical education, I would say, I was lucky to play with guys that were way above me talent-wise, and they brought me up, I think, and helped encourage me. Mentors, yeah. And Charles Calamise was my main mentor. He was Muddy Waters' bass player who ended up in Willimantic after a James Cotton tour. And Muddy played with Charles played with Muddy, played with Johnny Winter, he played with Ike and Tina Turner, and he was a big, big influence on me, as were the Easton brothers. They are two musicians from Eastern Connecticut that were a very big part of my musical development. So I always thought, I learned a lot in the classroom, but I learned just as much outside of the classroom about music,
Well, let's get into your career now. In your lifetime, you've released 8 albums with original music. Mm-hmm. How did all of this start? Like, how many bands have you been with? And kind of, if you can kind of just run through just where you started and where up to date, where you are now.
Well, when I was growing up in the area, I was playing with guys from my neighborhood, and we played quite a bit. We did a lot, even though we were underage. We were doing a lot of bar gigs at that point, and some high school gigs as well. And then from there, when I went to college, I formed a band called the Dirty Bones Band. It was a 5-piece band. And right off the bat, we started writing and playing our own music. And we did there were 2 EPs, which were sort of short play albums. And then ultimately, we did 2 CDs. And from there, I played throughout the 90s. That took us up until from 81 or 82 to about 1991. After that, I played with a band called the Del Reys, and we did all blues stuff. So we ended up doing 1 CD of original music with the Del Reys, and then from there, I produced that CD, and that did pretty well for us, and I was able to sort of call the shots on my next project, and I knew I wanted that to be sort of a rock and roll thing with some blues, but more rock and roll. And when I say rock and roll, I don't mean like hard rock or metal. I mean something that can trace its lineage, through Little Richard, Chuck Berry, the Stones, the Beatles, that type of thing. So there's that element of rock and roll versus sort of a pure rock thing. And for that, I called a friend of mine who I went to college with, who I had played with quite a bit in the past, Scott Lawson Pomeroy, and we formed the Mambo Sons. And that was 1999. We did our first album with Rick Derringer and Kenny Aronson, who's a world-class bassist. And we did a second CD. First one was just called Mambo Sons. Second one was Play Some Rock and Roll. The third one was called Racket of Three. And then the fourth one was called Heavy Days, and the fourth one was a double album.
Oh, wow.
And you say, why doesn't anybody release double albums these days? I'll tell you, it was ridiculous, the amount of work, because I wrote it, I produced it, I lined up all the sessions, I did all the arrangements, and it took the better part of a year, and I was exhausted after that. So after
you have to have all that music.
Yeah.
A lot of music.
It was 20 songs of original music. Actually 19, and we did one cover on that, a Jimi Hendrix tune, Stone Free. So from there, the Mambo Sons, we were playing like all over New England, but we were playing the same blues and rock and roll clubs, and there were fewer and fewer clubs, and we just got to the point where we were getting ridiculously good reviews around the world with our CD, and it was tough for us to get gigs in our backyards, better gigs. So we kind of said, let's put that on hold, and we all kind of, the trio, the 3 guys in the band, started doing their own thing. And that's when, about a year and a half ago, I started writing the music for All of the Above, which is my new solo CD that you have right there.
Right, this is it. Tom Guerra, All of the Above, and we were chatting about this. After working with all these bands, and like you said, you kind of went your separate ways, but instead of getting back with a bunch of different other people, you decided to do this. So how did that come to fruition?
I had started to write. I always am writing things, whether or not they make it to fruition as an entire song is another matter. But I keep a lot of notebooks with song ideas, lyrics, that type of thing. So what actually started the ball rolling on this was after the Sandy Hook tragedy happened, about 2 days after that, I woke up and I had the entire song of Love Comes to Us All in my head. So that afternoon I went into the studio, recorded the entire song, lyrics, guitar parts, lead guitar parts, got the arrangement down, did this really big chorus on there, singing all the parts. And it really, I sent it around to people. I actually got an email from the first selectman of Newtown, who said thank you for writing it and thanks for helping to bring some comfort to our people. So I started thinking, wow, music, once again, the power of music. And So even though that song appears on the CD as the last song, it's the first one I wrote for it. And from there, I just really was tuned in, and I wrote, I think, 15 songs in total, and picked the best 11 for the CD, and started recording that in early 2014, and got it done by about halfway during the year. And since then, it's really been doing well for us. And
you have like a promo video, right? That kind of kicks
Right.
off your CD. So I think that we're gonna play that right now, so that people can understand kind of, because that explains
Sure.
a little bit more. Of
sure, that
how
that
they
kind of
got
talks
going.
about the concept. Yeah.
Right.
Mickey Phillips is a New York City guitar player, great player, with a group that was big in the 70s called The Planets. And he was the only one besides the musicians to hear the songs on this as they were being put together. He commented to me that he really liked the eclectic nature of these songs, and as such, I should call it all of the above. So I did. It's got 11 tunes on it in several musical styles that I like. Lots of guitar stuff. You got a few harder things. Some poppier, jangly music. A sort of 70s funk tune. An acoustic dobro track. Some glam rock. And overall, a lot of rock and roll. This is the first record I made where going into it, I knew I'd be singing all these songs. So things like tunings, keys, and progressions all figured into that. Lyrically, it's pretty much all about things that I've experienced in my life. The two special guests on the CD are Matt Ziner, who's a true keyboard genius, and Morgan Fisher, who played with two of my favorite bands, both Mott the Hoople and Queen. I first met Morgan at the 2009 Mott the Hoople reunion in London and felt an immediate connection with him. Both of these guys added a lot to these songs. As a fan of guitar-based rock and roll music, I wanted to get these songs out there because I don't think enough of it is being heard these days. So, hope you like it and check it out.
All right, so, well, a little bit about me. I started playing the clarinet when I was younger, and then in middle school we all had this great teacher, Mr. Sales. We talked a lot about him with a couple of my other guests, and he was a huge inspiration. But mainly, music for me was always the background. I've been dancing since I was 1.5. They put tap shoes on my feet as soon as I could walk, I think. And so, music in that respect was always, like that emotional release for me, while we were in the dance studio. And recently, a couple of us were chatting, some of the dance teachers, and we were saying that, it's not like we all sit around and all get emotional, but we all understand the emotion that music can actually bring and make you feel. And so I was inspired when I heard your song on that record, because you probably don't realize the lives not only that you touched, but that you helped heal with that song on your CD. So tell us a little bit about that song, and then we can play that track as well.
Sure thing. That, as I said a couple minutes ago, nobody knew what to do. That was one of the worst tragedies that we had ever experienced in our lifetimes.
I think the world maybe even was touched.
I mean, I'll never forget that day, because I picked my son up at school, and he was only in, I think, 4th grade, and I just went in and I gave him a big hug, and he said, "What's wrong? Something's wrong." So, he learned later on what happened. So nobody knew what to do. And I think I kind of wrote that to sort of get some emotions out of myself, but also to let those people know no song could ever bring back what they lost, but it was a message of support. And I named the song "Love Comes to Us All" because I wanted the people that were impacted by that to know that we were pulling for them and we were sending them our love. So that's "Love Comes to Us All."
And so let's play that track. I think we have that track available here today. So.
Nourished with rain from our eyes.
were talking earlier, you had mentioned one of your greatest influences and was Matt the Hoople.
Right,
So
right.
let's chat about him a little bit, because we have another track to play
Right.
on the CD, and so bring us up to that.
Yeah, Matt the Hoople was really a seminal 70s band that I never thought I would get to see live. And then in 2009, they announced they were getting back together for shows in London. So I said, I gotta go. So, of course, I went the opening night of the reunion in Hammersmith Odeon. And before the show, I met their keyboard player, who played on a lot of their greatest music, Morgan Fisher. So we kind of hit it off and had several drinks, in a bar, and we kept in touch. And I told him that I was a musician. I had sent him some of my music, which he enjoyed, and he said, next time you do something, let me know. So I was writing the All of the Above CD, and I came up with this sort of goofy track that I consider big dumb rock, because it's got this big monster type riff. And I sent it to him, and he got a kick out of it. He said, oh yeah, he's like, count me down for this. And his name's Morgan Fisher, and he plays on this next track we're going to play, which is called Frankenstein Boots.
That's a really fun song. I wanted to get up and dance. Well, so let's now talk about, I know you're busy, obviously. You've been doing all these great things music-wise, and you had said you had taken some classes, and one of the things that I was talking to you about earlier was, again, this CD is produced by Tom Guerra for Casa del Sol Productions. So talk a little bit about that. You have a whole production studio.
Right. Yes, I have a studio, and I've been fortunate enough because when you have your own studio, you can experiment, and you're not under the pressure of being on the clock. I did a lot of studio work in the 90s at another studio, and was sort of an on-call studio guitar player, and it was run very tight, and you didn't really get a lot of chances to experiment. You were there to do a job and play on somebody else's tune. But having the ability to have my own studio really allows me to kind of experiment with different sounds, whether they're guitar sounds or drum sounds or bass or whatnot. So I really get into it. And as we were talking before, the stuff available now for home studios is as good, if not better, than the greatest studios in the world had 25 years ago. So the technology is all there. The ability to edit, a lot of people don't even use real musicians anymore. They'll just sample. But I like the sound of real drums. I like the sound of different people playing. So that's why I think the old style of recording as a band really for the type of music I like really is just can't be beat. So, and I'm busy with other things as well. Since I think it was 97, I started writing for Vintage Guitar Magazine, and have been writing for them ever since. So for the past 18 years, I will research a guitar player that I like. I'll interview that person, spend time with them. And the magazine is a monthly publication, and it's a great magazine. And I've gotten spread it out a little bit now to do gear reviews about new guitars coming out, new amps, new pedals, that type of thing. So that keeps me really busy between the two things.
That's awesome. So let's get into the essence of being a musician. So can you talk about so far what you think your greatest moment was as a musician? Like if you can think of all the shows that you've did, or just another moment. Any?
In terms of the shows that I've done, getting to play some of the bigger halls in the area. Toad's Place, played there a couple times. That was a great thing because I had seen so many great shows there as a kid. Not as a kid, as a legal 18-year-old. That was the drinking age back then. And, we played the Bushnell at one point. That was a big deal. And just getting, the biggest kick for me is really getting to play original music in front of people who have not heard it before, and trying to, convert them, if you will, to the way of thinking that our music, gets across. So that's a great thing, just being able to play that. And I would say really any of the recordings I've done have been sort of a highlight, sort of a snapshot for that point in time. And that's really what I enjoy more than anything now. I was very, very excited when All of the Above came out, because it was just, I had a vision as to what I wanted that to sound like. And I think whenever you're doing an album, you have a vision or a concept as to what you want it to sound like. And I think the best releases are those that sort of get closest to that vision, to executing that vision. So I was really excited. It came out like I wanted it to sound. The guitars sounded nice and crunchy, and where they needed to sound crunchy. There's some 12-string stuff on there. So that's, I think, my proudest moment was coming out with my own solo CD. But that being said, I'm looking forward to working with other musicians as well going forward, and we're going to be doing some work with the Mambo Sons once again as well. So,
excellent. Now, in over the years, have you come across any obstacles or anything that has kind of either made you stopped or just created a more difficult time in your life where you really had to get through that part? Does anything like that come to mind?
It is not an easy time to be a musician who plays the type of music that we play, which is sort of a guitar-based rock and roll thing, because although it may have been huge at one time, it's no longer the darling of the industry. And so not a lot of people are listening to it, so it's been an uphill battle. I've been doing a ton of promotional stuff, radio shows, TV shows, which I really appreciate you having me on, just to get the word out that there is this type of music out there. Check it out, and I've got a website, I've got the YouTube videos that I try to promote, and we do a lot through social media as well. I've got a couple people that help me out with that, so that's been an obstacle. But the other thing is, it's still a great time to be a musician because there's so much left to do in terms of writing new music. I mean, it never ends,
Right, and like you said, now sometimes people are kind of creating music in the studios, and so it's almost like a rare talent to have people who can play good music.
Right, and I think that was evidenced by the Grammys the other night when, the first band up there was AC/DC, and they just rocked the place supremely.
Unbelievable.
I think they were the best act there, and they were, they didn't need
Me too.
100 dancers dancing around and, shaking it. They were just up there rocking, and to me, that's what it's all about,
Right, we're kind of old school, I guess. We probably have
That's
that
okay by me, yeah.
So now, one of the last questions we like to get out there to our audience is, hopefully we have kids out there, maybe thinking, gee, I really would love to be a musician, or, I want to get into rock and roll. And so what advice do you have for kids? How do they kind of, how do they stay on that path? How do they keep playing?
I think the best thing kids can do at this point, whether they're, preteen or teenagers, is get together a band, and you're going to be terrible and play in your garage and play loud, and it's not going to be pretty at first, but you will improve. And write your own music if you can. And some people are drawn to that. Other people like covering music, and that's fine too. The thing that I've noticed throughout the years is the level of technical proficiency that musicians have has just gone up so high. I mean, when we were kids, sort of the bar was, Eddie Van Halen's Eruption, and if you could play that, which I never could play, still can't play it, you were considered a great guitar player. And now you've got, I saw a YouTube video of like an 11-year-old girl playing that as good, if not better, as Eddie Van Halen played it. So people can play. I mean, there's so many ways to learn. You can learn on YouTube lessons. You can take traditional lessons at a music school or at somebody's house, or you can just kind of pick it up and learn off of CDs or off of MP3s. So there's, and to me, when I was that age, it was sort of a challenge, and nobody laid that challenge down. I was the one who said, I want to really get inside this song and figure out what this guy did. And that's sort of, to me, the essence of becoming a musician, when there's something inside of you that is leading you to, giving you the desire to want to be good at that guitar or the piano or the drums or the bass or whatever.
Right, that emotional connection.
It is an emotional connection, and it does, I think, with an artistic type of person, fulfill a need within you.
Excellent. And so now you've prepared something for us for today, I think, right?
I am going to do a song. I rarely do acoustic songs. I write most of the stuff on acoustic guitar, but then like the fact that you can go in the studio and sort of arrange it properly with electric guitars and drums and all sorts of Sturm and Drang. But I'm going to do a song off of the All of the Above CD called Dirty Son, and this is a song about growing up, close to the Berlin Turnpike and some of the things the singer of the song saw.
Excellent.
3, 4.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you very much, Michele.
This was outstanding. We really appreciate
I really enjoyed it too.
If you sign our board, I will give you a t-shirt so you can look just like me.
I definitely want to sign your board.
And there you are. I could sit here and talk with you all night, but I got to get going. I got to get me some Frankenstein boots.
All right. Thank you. It was nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too.